You are standing in the ruins of your town with a strip of cloth tied around your wrists. The soldiers have taken the food, the animals, and anything made of metal. Now an officer points at you and asks who helped the enemy. You do not know the answer. That does not matter. He is not asking because he needs information. He is asking because someone must pay, and in war, the person chosen to pay is often the one least able to fight back. For women caught in war, punishment did not always begin with a trial, a law, or even an accusation. Sometimes the crime was living in the wrong village, marrying the wrong man, hiding food, carrying a message, treating the wounded, or simply surviving after an army decided that survival looked suspicious. The rules stayed ugly and simple. Armies wanted obedience, occupiers wanted silence, and rulers wanted examples. Women became targets not only because of what they had done, but because hurting them could frighten families, shame communities, and punish men who were no longer there. The first punishment was often humiliation. After civil wars, occupations, and political purges, women accused of helping the enemy could be dragged into a square, stripped, smeared with dirt, paraded through streets, or marked so everyone knew they had been condemned. In 20th century Europe, some women accused of relationships with occupying soldiers had their heads shaved in public. Crowds laughed, shouted, and took photographs. The shaving was not meant to hurt much physically. That was the point. It turned the woman into a walking warning. Her appearance announced the accusation before she could explain anything. Evidence was often thin, revenge was common, and private grudges suddenly wore patriotic uniforms. The authorities called it cleansing. The crowd called it justice. The woman discovered that her neighbors had been keeping a list. But humiliation was only the mild end. In many wars, women were punished through forced labor. Conquering armies needed trenches dug, supplies carried, uniforms washed, meals cooked, and wounded men cared for. Local women could be ordered to work under guard, often without enough food. Refusal might bring beating, imprisonment, loss of rations, or punishment against relatives. Imagine carrying ammunition for the army that burned your home. You are hungry, your shoes are failing, and the guard tells you to move faster. Technically, you are not a prisoner. You are simply not allowed to leave, refuse, rest, or complain. Historical governments have always been talented at finding cheerful names for captivity. Then came hostage-taking. When armies could not catch rebels, deserters, or resistance fighters, they sometimes arrested wives, mothers, sisters, and daughters. The message was obvious: surrender, or your family suffers. Women might be confined in jails, camps, or guarded houses. Their actions mattered less than their relationships. This worked because family loyalty could be turned into a weapon. A fighter hiding in the hills might ignore threats against himself. Threats against his mother were different. The occupying force only needed to create guilt. Some were released after questioning. Others disappeared into prisons where disease, hunger, and abuse did most of the work. You could survive the arrest and still lose years of your life because someone else had the wrong last name. Another punishment was collective starvation. During sieges and occupations, food was power. Armies confiscated grain, destroyed crops, blocked markets, or issued rations only to approved households. Women feeding children and elderly relatives were forced into impossible choices. Sell your last possession. Walk miles for flour. Trade labor for a potato. Hide food and risk execution if it is found. Starvation was rarely announced as punishment. It arrived as policy, a blockade, requisition, or security measure. Official words for watching your child become thinner each week. And somehow, it gets worse. Sexual violence has been used in wars across many periods and regions as terror, punishment, revenge, and domination. Women were attacked during sackings, forced removals, ethnic campaigns, and reprisals. Sometimes soldiers exploited chaos. Sometimes commanders tolerated it. In some conflicts, it was organized or encouraged. The purpose was not only to harm one victim. It could break families, drive people from land, and convince a population that no home was safe. Survivors might then face rejection from their own communities, especially where honor was unfairly tied to women's bodies. So the victim was punished twice. First by the attacker, then by people who believed her suffering had somehow damaged them. Humanity sometimes sees injustice and decides the solution is more injustice. Women captured in war could also be enslaved. In the ancient and medieval worlds, the fall of a city often meant surviving civilians became property. Women could be sold, transported far from home, forced into domestic labor, agricultural work, textile production, or sexual servitude. Their names might be changed. Their children could be taken, sold, or born into slavery. For the victors, this was treated as part of the reward system. Soldiers expected loot, and human beings were counted among it. A conquered woman might go from managing her household in the morning to being priced in a market days later. There was no courtroom scene. No judge asked for her defense. The city had lost. That was the verdict. Women suspected of spying faced another danger. Female messengers, nurses, innkeepers, and traders could move where armed men attracted attention. This made women useful to resistance networks and intelligence services. It also made every ordinary action look suspicious once fear took over. A hidden note, an unusual journey, or a conversation with the wrong person could lead to interrogation, imprisonment, torture, or execution. Some really were spies. Others were not. War does not always pause to separate the brave from the unlucky. Even medical work could become a crime. A woman who treated a wounded enemy might be accused of collaboration. A woman who treated a rebel might be accused of treason. Apparently, stopping someone from bleeding becomes politically complicated when governments are involved. Then there were punishments aimed at identity. In ethnic and religious conflicts, women could be forced to change clothing, abandon language, convert, relocate, or surrender children for re-education. Their marriages might be controlled, their homes reassigned, their names replaced in official records. These measures were often presented as order, reform, or national security. But the goal could be darker. Erase a community by breaking the people who carried its family life, customs, memory, and future generations. Not every famous story about wartime punishment is reliable. Later propaganda often exaggerated enemy cruelty, invented dramatic atrocities, or repeated rumors until they sounded like fact. That does not mean the real violence was minor. It means the truth matters, especially when suffering is used to sell another war. The strongest evidence comes from court records, military orders, survivor testimony, photographs, letters, and camp documents. Even then, numbers may be disputed and many crimes were never recorded. Shame, fear, destroyed archives, and dead witnesses leave enormous gaps, and surviving did not end the punishment. A woman returning from captivity might find her house gone, her husband dead, her children missing, and her community suspicious of whatever she had done to stay alive. Widows could lose property. Refugees could spend years in camps. Survivors of assault might remain silent for decades. Former prisoners could be treated as collaborators simply because they had returned. War likes clean categories: hero, traitor, victim, enemy. Real people are inconveniently complicated. The worst punishments women faced in war were not always the most physically brutal. Often, they were the ones designed to keep spreading after the soldiers left. Public shame that followed a woman home, hunger that weakened a child, captivity that erased a name, violence that a family refused to discuss. A missing daughter whose fate was never learned. The battlefield eventually becomes quiet. Flags change. Officers write memoirs. Politicians give speeches about sacrifice. And somewhere, a woman is still living with a sentence that was never written down, imposed for a crime she may never have committed, by men who called it necessary, because war had made cruelty sound reasonable.